we're excited. This is the, I think we're focused on B2B, and what does it mean to be a founder in the B2B world, and I think it's really exciting that we're ending the 2 days focused on founders, right? And I think that's where a lot of, either you're an LP or a VC, you're focused on the company. So would love for Dean and Steve and Luke for us to start off. Would love to hear about your background, where you're from, or do you have a veteran background? And then what's your company? What have you founded, and what are you focused on?
So Dean Wegner here. I'm a veteran, an entrepreneur, and my priorities in life align with God, family, and country. And my wife and I, we've been married 28 years, and we've got 4 amazing kids. We've got 2 daughters, 24 and 21. We have an 18-year-old son, and we have a 12-year-old son that we adopted from Ethiopia. So I like to highlight the personal things, because when you're an entrepreneur, I mean, you can get pulled in so many different directions and have so much time taken away, but that's what's most important to me. And from a country standpoint, I graduated from West Point in '93, went to flight school, and after flight school learned how to fly helicopters. I had a unique opportunity to go to the Army Special Forces Ranger School. Spent 7 years active duty, and it's interesting, when I left the Army in 2000, couldn't even spell entrepreneur. I had no idea this world even existed. And my dad was a 30-year engineer for Alcoa. Most of his friends, most of his neighbors worked for Fortune 500 companies. So what did I think I was going to do when I left the Army? Work for a big company. I mean, that's the only world I knew, and had incredible experience at Procter & Gamble and Mars. Both are just world-class marketing and branding companies, but I also have this insatiable desire to know that I'm making a difference. And when you work for an $80 billion company, you learn quickly that you're a cog in the wheel, and you're very replaceable. And that, for me, was the initial catalyst to become an entrepreneur. And ultimately, 5 years ago, from a blank sheet of paper is where we launched Authentically American. And we're an apparel brand. We have amazing product, but it's all made here in the U.S. And to give you an idea how rare American-made is, when I graduated in '93, over 50% was made in the U.S. Today, it's 3.5. And that's what drives me. We got to have amazing product, but what I'm most excited about is the opportunity to make a difference and ultimately create American jobs. Steve?
Yeah, so thanks. My name's Stephen Lee. I'm West Point 01. Deployed to Iraq in 2004 and 2005, up north near Mosul. Pretty hot place at that given point in time. Got out, did my 5 and out. Ended up going to MIT to get a dual degree, Master's in Engineering and my MBA. And then came out here to Silicon Valley to start working for some pretty big high-tech companies. Before I quit and did this, I was an executive at one of the well-known high-tech companies here in the Valley as well. We have a company called Crowds, and we're a fintech company. One of the key needs is, about 60 to 65% of small, medium businesses contribute to the GDP here in the US as well as in the UK. But when they try to go get funding from either a factoring company or even a loan from a bank, it's really hard for them to get favorable rates because they're small. The data that proves that they're financially stable doesn't really exist. And so that's where we come to the table. We're a marketplace that helps small, medium businesses sell their receivables to large financial institutions. Citibank's one of our customers. Facebook and Meta is one of our customers. Barclays Bank is one of our customers. We've put about 100 million of business through our platform. JP Morgan and Wells Fargo, I know they're here. FOMO, right? So that's what we do. We have a way to be able to risk rate at the receivable level for small and medium businesses, and that capability doesn't exist in the market. So what does that mean for the small and medium business? That actually means they can actually sell their receivable and get paid faster with favorable rates, given the fact that they provide the data to us. We have a way in which we can actually have those small and medium business link in via API their accounting platforms, and then we have all this data to say, hey, this is, for your $100,000 invoice, you should probably sell it at $95,000 because that's the risk profile for your receivable. And then we recommend things like that to these institutions, and then they have an ability to buy, right? So we're a marketplace, hard to balance supply and demand. Supply is the receivables from these small, medium businesses, and then the demand is the funding that comes from these institutions. And what's interesting about these institutions, these financial institutions, with interest rates on the rise, with the economy getting pretty shaky, it's another way, it's an alternative means, it's another alternative for investment vehicles, right? And so by using this data, we're able to collate the risk profile of a small and medium business entity. And we're able to do things that hasn't been able to be done in the past. So we're actually launching a token in 6 months with MasterCard and Citibank in Latin America. And launching this token allows people to track the ownership of who owns the asset of the receivable. It allows for things like syndication, securitization, and being able to sell in the secondary market, which really hasn't been done in a very efficient manner. It's very manual. So again, we are a Web3 company. By utilizing blockchain and having the token being minted on the coin, having the coin being minted on the chain, it allows for the ability to do those types of things, and it accelerates the marketplace traction as well. So that's essentially what Crowds does.
Alrighty, good stuff. I'm Luke Hutchinson with Perfect Venue, graduated from West Point in 2013 and served as a Army infantry officer for 5 years at Fort Carson. In between deployments to Afghanistan, we'd have, hail and farewells, battalion balls, things like that. And I'm sure, as most folks in the room know, the Army does not spend our taxpayer dollars on event planners. So the nearest lieutenant to the battalion commander gets, picked for finding and booking a venue, which happened to be myself for a few of these. And it was just a nightmare trying to find and book a venue, combing the internet, calling around, going to the place we went last year, they're not available or whatever. And so really that's where the idea of kind of an Airbnb for event spaces at restaurants was born. And so just started out in Colorado Springs, started literally with like a spreadsheet of all the venues in our area, a Google form that folks would fill out, and it just quickly grew from there. I quickly learned that I was not the only person that had this problem, and we built out kind of an Airbnb type experience, and everything was going great at first. However, when you would send the inquiry to the venue, it was just an email. There's no availability, no payments, nothing on the back end, and so it was like basically like pouring water into a leaky bucket. We'd send all these inquiries to the venues, and they wouldn't respond, or they'd take days to respond. And so I went down, and it was kind of like, hey guys, what's going on? We're sending you thousands of dollars in events, and they're like screwing around in some back office with all these spreadsheets everywhere, and papers and pens and sticky notes with thousands of dollars, and credit card authorizations on the floor, and saw a real opportunity to basically build a tool to help them digitize their private events business, which it's about a third of their revenue for a full service restaurant, but it's often 40 or 50% of their profits, and especially with everything that's happened with COVID and the staffing shortage, it's been really a great journey, and we're seeing a ton of demand, and have been growing really quickly, especially in the last year. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. Just came pretty much straight out of the military into the entrepreneurial thing, and it's been lots of ups, lots of downs, but a good time. So.
No, thank you all. I appreciate it. It's really neat to see three vets that are founders of companies, but very, very different, right? We got a fintech, a venue platform, and then an apparel brand. So some really cool diversity. I'd love to dive in a little bit on, hey, why did y'all, and you, Dean, you spoke to this a little bit, but maybe I'll start with you, Steve, on, hey, why did y'all decide to take the plunge and to become a founder and start your own company? That's probably, as all of us know, not an easy transition, a pretty significant commitment. So would love to hear just from y'all, what prompted you to make that transition, and how has that gone?
Yeah, so for me, hopefully I can be deeply personal and vulnerable with everyone here, because I think we have a lot in common being veterans. For me, it is two main reasons, right? It's hope and purpose, right? And growing up, I grew up in Southern California in a pretty bad neighborhood. You know, my dad owned a small business actually, and I knew how hard it was for him to survive because we're always strapped for cash. And so, you know, by being able to help small, medium businesses survive and thrive, it really spoke to me on a very personal level. Fast forward 20 plus years, you know, I found myself in Iraq, and like many of you in this room, I came back a different person, right? You know, I came back survivor's guilt, always questioning, you know, what's my purpose in life? Why my buddy, not me? I worked in corporate America, just wasn't fulfilling. You know, in corporate America, you're in your own little silo. You know, I was used to, in the Army, serving a purpose greater than myself. And I didn't really get that in corporate America, and it led to all sorts of things, right? Didn't know, you know, lack of direction in my life. And so, you know, long story short, I started to question, like, why am I here? Why was I spared? And I wanted to do something that actually served a purpose that's greater than myself. So that's kind of how it got started, you know, hope and purpose. And, you know, that, for me at least, that's kind of the driving force to get me through the real rough times. I mean, being an entrepreneur is really hard. There have been times where I didn't know how I was going to pay payroll for my employees. I mean, right now we have 100 plus people, but back in the day it was tough, right? And for me, I clung onto that hope and purpose to get me through those rough times. And so that's the motivation for me to actually jump in and start something what I believe is meaningful and can actually change what we do to really impact in a positive way small and medium businesses, and hopefully be able to bolster the global economy through this mechanism, right? So that's my story.
Good stuff. And I can definitely relate to that as well with, I mean, I think the passion for serving small businesses. I would say for me, it really just started with like having that problem. And I just remember I was like starting to think about getting out of the military and just like driving home one day and just like stuck in traffic. So I was going to go look at some venue and, you know, see what their back event space looked like. And they didn't have any pictures on their website. And I just started like, yeah, it was the biggest problem in my life at that time and was really frustrated by it. And it happened over and over. So I was just like, you know, I'm going to try and solve this thing. I don't know anything about technology, but I'm going to figure it out as I go, just like you do in the military. And one thing led to another. But I think, like, to your point of kind of it started with this very like kind of like tactical level problem, I would say, but it's really grown into this like passion and an obsession for helping entrepreneurs. And it's a blast. Like small businesses, like there are definitely challenges with working with them, no doubt. Like they have their quirks, but it's so much fun because I think they're just all really passionate about their business. And it's, to your point, Stephen, you know, really the backbone of the American economy, and it's really what makes our economy very vibrant and thrive, and, you know, having all these diversity of businesses. So yeah, that's kind of how we got started and kind of what keeps me going. So,
and I touched on me and my desire to want to make a difference, which ultimately boiled down to creating American jobs. And I remember 5 years ago when we started, and this is how naive and how ignorant I was, because I thought, this is going to be easy. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I was clear in my vision, built this robust 3-year business plan, had a pro forma financial forecast, and I thought it was going to be easy. 5 years later, I'm exhausted. I mean, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Everything I took for granted at Procter & Gamble and Mars, the supply chain, the systems, process, finance, cash flow, everything, you know, we've had to build from the ground up. But as exhausted as I am, I'm even more energized because truly feel as an entrepreneur, have an opportunity to make a difference. And one of my favorite mantras is go big or go home. And I don't want to lose my home, so we're going big.
No, I appreciate that. I think one of the common trends or themes I tend to see when I'm talking to veteran founders is a lot of times they really care deeply about what they're doing, and they have a greater sense of purpose about the company, but also the vision behind it. So appreciate that. Would love to kind of pivot a little bit and talk to y'all about fundraising and your journey about raising capital. 2023 is probably a little bit different from a fundraising perspective than last year and the year before that, a little bit more difficult. So would love to hear how y'all raised capital in the past, and then also how are you viewing that in, you know, the rest of this year going forward if you're looking to raise?
So I'll go ahead and start because we've raised $2 million in capital, and I remember reading a lot about raising capital because I didn't know anything about it. And what was shocking to me, if you're a VC firm, you're professional money, private equity, you may look at 100 deals and maybe invest in 1 or 2 or 3. And I thought, I don't stand that good a chance, you know, as a brand new entrepreneur being able to make that happen. And another one of my favorite mantras, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and investing in relationships. And I've never been the smartest guy in the room, but one thing I do, I go out of my way to invest in people. And the initial year one, we raised $500,000, and I wasn't going out and looking at people that I've never met before. These were people I know. These are people that I've invested in, people that believed in me, believed in my vision. And it wasn't easy raising $500,000, but it was far easier, far less friction than trying to go through a professional route. So that is one of the things that stuck with me, and that first $500,000 then propelled it onto, you know, investment after that. But it was every single one of our angel investors. Either I know personally and have a relationship, or it's somebody that is a friend of one of those angel investors.
So we went through multiple rounds of funding. We went through a couple seed rounds. We went through an A round. We went through an A+ round. We went through a convertible round, and we're probably going to go through an extension round, even though we don't need the money at this point. So all in all, you know, we've raised about $28 million. In terms of equity. One of the things that I learned was trying to land a lighthouse account, right? When we landed Facebook and Meta, that was a huge milestone for us, right? You got a Fortune 100 company that is investing in your small inky-dinky business to make an impact. Right? And so Facebook and Meta became our lighthouse accounts. Barclays Bank in London was actually one of our very, very early investors as well. So for us, you know, we bent over backwards for Meta and Facebook. Even though we were losing money on the business, we wanted to use that brand name, that lighthouse account, as marketing collateral to go out to investors and say, hey, you know, we have Barclays on our board. We now have Citibank as an equity investor, and it's also on our board. We have Meta that we've pumped, you know, $80, $90 million of business through. And it becomes an easier conversation when you've actually launched a product, you've fed millions and millions of dollars through your platform, and the next big customer isn't your guinea pig, right? And it helps just kind of lubricate that the ability to say, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to reach out to, you know, an Apollo, right, which is a private equity firm, or I'm going to reach out to Andreessen. You know, it's a little bit easier. So for us, I mean, everyone's experience is different, but for us, we try to land that 1 or 2 lighthouse accounts first, even though we were not making money. Like, quite frankly, you know, if you ask me now, we were probably taken advantage of, but that's fine. We got the name brand, and we used the crap out of that to market ourselves to both other customers as well as investors. And so we were able to kind of keep raising money, so forth and so on. You know, getting ready to raise our Series B, and so that's my experience so far.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff, and I think, like, to me, the biggest thing I've learned is just, yeah, it's about the relationships and about the people. My first raise, it took about 7 months to put together $750K, and then the most recent raise, it took about a couple weeks to put together like $3.5 million. And the biggest thing that I learned, like, during the first 7 months, when I was just slogging it out, like, I would start off with these lists of, like, 100 VCs that invest in, hospitality technology or whatever, and like send them emails, and like just nothing. And what I learned was like finding folks that even if I didn't have a direct relationship with them, and I think we had like maybe a few percentage points of friends and family in the first round, was like finding folks who had a similar background. So, whether they're Service Academy grads or, if I was into underwater basket weaving and they were into underwater basket weaving, like whatever it was, finding those commonalities. And then from there, looking for folks that if they had that shared background, like that had an interest in, investing in startups at our stage and in our industry, and like just trying to find, some sort of thread that you could use to, bring the conversation forward. And so, we've been very fortunate. Had the first investor in Zoom led our pre-seed round. Defy Ventures led our seed round. Obviously, the market is much more difficult right now, so we got fortunate on our timing. And I think another big thing is also like having that product, especially if you're a software startup. Like I run into a lot of founders, they're like, oh, I need to like raise money to build a product. And that is definitely true, especially for, more challenging or like hardware products and things like that. But I think more and more so because the cost of starting a company is like almost, or a software company in particular, is almost zero. Investors these days, I think, really expect, even at the pre-seed, that first round that you raise, to have some customers and have some traction. And that goes so much further. I mean, you can bang your head against a wall fundraising for 5 months and hope something works, or you can take 5 months and try and get customers and get that product out into market and get revenue, and then you're going to probably be able to raise much faster. And so I think that's like definitely something that I see, especially from veteran entrepreneurs or folks that aren't like coming from Uber or Stripe or whatever the latest and greatest startup is, that are in kind of well networked and in the ecosystem. Just like having that initial product and traction, because that is just going to immediately separate you from the hundreds of other entrepreneurs that are sending decks to investors. So.
Can I add something real quick? I forgot to say this, but we have an investor newsletter that goes out every quarter, right? And the first 13 investors when I started the company said no, but that wasn't a dead end. You just say, hey, can I keep you posted? Can I add your email to the investor newsletter? And most likely they'll say yes. So every month or every quarter, I'm sorry, we'll send out an investor newsletter, and it's like, hey, here are the metrics, here's the traction we're making, here are the opportunities that we've navigated through, here's another market that we can play in, here's the customers. Just a 1 or 2 pager with metrics and KPIs, right? And it goes out literally to 1,000+ email contacts. And I found that to be very helpful when raising money. TFX, who was on the panel yesterday, initially when we reached out to TFX, they told me no. And so I'm like, okay, great. Can I put your email on the investor newsletter distro? And they said, yeah, sure. A year later, we get an email from them after we send out the newsletter, say, hey, let's talk. And this goes, hand in hand with building the relationship, right? It's not like you have to be buddy with them, but just constant contact. Keeping that lead warm. And so we found that the investor newsletter definitely helped. And now, obviously TFX is an investor in us as well, but that's just a way that you can keep your lead warm when you're raising money.
No, I appreciate that. That's a great story of kind of persistence that definitely paid off. Would love to hear from y'all about your relationships with your investors, right? Those that maybe are on your cap table, maybe they have a board seat. What has been really beneficial and proven to be, something that's been real beneficial for your relationship? And what are things that you like to see from those investors as you're working with them and developing relationships with them?
So for me, of the 21 angel investors we have, I put them in 3 different camps. There's one group, and there's only a couple in this camp that have a little bit of time on their hands, and they're very excited about what I'm doing, and every month or so they will come up with ideas, they'll make referrals for clients, and really value the insight and perspective and love that they're active and engaged. On the opposite end of the spectrum You know, I have one friend who cashed out in his business for $500 million. $500 million. So it wasn't a problem writing a six-figure check, but he has so many things going on in his life. He was like, Dean, you got 20 other people, so just tell me when the liquidity event is, and I'll tell you where to put the check. But he's not involved in all, and there's a few on that camp, but there's a few in the middle, and these are probably the ones that I value most because it's a variety of different experiences. So one example is Darrell Waltrip. He's a Nashville resident, NASCAR Hall of Famer, so he is a member of that angel investor group. And if I need something and I call Darrell, he's right there, whatever I need. And a prime example, one of the things that we've been blessed with is incredible national TV coverage. And our very first time was on Fox and Friends, and 2 million people a day. 2 million people tune into Fox and Friends a day. And when I was invited, I was nervous. I'm like, I don't want to screw this up. So I called up Darrell and I said, you are not only a NASCAR Hall of Famer, but you're a TV pro. Would you be willing to go ahead and spend a couple days with me in New York City? And he was like, absolutely. Whatever you need, Dean, I'm there. So those are the three camps, but it's really that group in the middle that I value, because if I have a finance question, there's somebody I go to. If there's a logistics question, somebody I go to. If I need national TV help, you know, I call DW.
Yeah, kind of for our investors, I just view them like as an extension of the team in a way, and I think that has helped build like a good cohesion. And to me, like what that means by treating them as team members is like having that same level of openness, that same level of candidness. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are concerned with like, oh, what if we like tell them something's not going well or whatever. I'm like no, man, like the game, what we're trying to do here is win. What we're trying to do here is achieve our mission and, build a large, enduring company that solves problems for customers. And these investors, often, they're, very successful founders or entrepreneurs. They've seen a lot of companies succeed and fail. And so I've found that, being transparent with them not only, I think, increases trust, but also like helps us solve our problems, so we can achieve our mission better. And to Steven's point about the business update, like that is pure gold. Like I think, just building a, in MailChimp or whatever, just a list of like, when you go to an event like this and, whether you meet founders or investors or whatever, just asking, hey, is it cool if I, add you to my business update list or whatever? And then, you send it out. And that's like a very high leverage way to, keep people in the loop with what you're doing. And you just got to send it out, click the button once, and whether it goes to 100 or 1,000 people, it's the same amount of work. And I've often found too that like founders, although they're not, often investors, are like the best source for investors because, everyone up here is venture backed and we have investors. And, if we find a founder that we like and trust and believe in what they're doing, our investors have already invested in us. So, our word is much better than just some random cold email. So it's definitely not a guarantee, but it's doing whatever you can to get that edge that over the person that's just cold emailing. And if you can get that warm intro by building kind of that trust and that relationship with other folks, it'll go a long way.
Yeah, I think for me, we don't like to take dumb money, right? So dumb money being the sense that they don't know anything about the business, but they have the money and they don't know where to park it. So they're like, oh, you guys are growing, here's a couple million. And then they come back to you and they're like, where's my traction, where's this? And they know nothing about the business. So we try to stay away from dumb money. The other thing that we try to do for our board is we're really big in terms of diversity on our board, right? We want people with different experiences that can actually help us propel and make traction. We want folks that can make intros to industry leaders, companies, investors, so forth and so on, even globally, right? On our board, half of our board is U.S., and then the other half, we have one in Amsterdam and we have one in the U.K., right? So, making the board diverse, we have females on our board, we have minorities on our board, and I even have a West Pointer, Todd Cooper, who's the president of Celestica on our board as an independent board member, right? And Todd's never done a startup, but he has industry contacts that are very valuable. That's how we got Facebook. He made the intro. So, just like Luke said, I mean, I treat them as an extension of our team. And I would even go as far as, like, literally, I would assign action items to my board members. You said you could help me introduce, the team to this person or that person. Where are we with that? Do you have an update? Right? Because, a lot of the board members, some of them will tell you to do this or do that, and okay, then what are you doing for me? Right? How can you help me gain traction? How can you provide a warm intro that's meaningful to me? And so, during our board meetings, we'll go over certain things. Hey, where are we with that intro type of stuff? And so we really do leverage the network that our board brings. And again, our board has different perspectives. They come from different industries. Two of our board members, and this is really important for me at least, is there's a lot of VCs out there, and no knock on VCs. There's a lot of VCs out there that do not have startup experience. Two of our board members, after they've exited, they're now VCs. And so it's pretty refreshing when that VC reaches out to me and say, hey, Steve, how are you doing? Oh, it's okay. Everything's good. No, really, how are you doing? Like, I know what you're going through right now because I went through the same thing. That's gold to me, right? Because rather than accepting dumb money that they don't know anything about the business, just to have two people on your board that have had startup experience and understand how hard it can be is invaluable, right? And a lot of times when things aren't going well, they're the ones who stick up for us. Say, hey, I've done this in the past, maybe you're not going to get traction this year or this quarter, but I can see that, you guys are making progress and it'll happen, right? To have those types of allies, talk to the other members of the board and say, hey, they're good, right? Just have confidence, just be a little bit patient. That was invaluable to our experience. So.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you all for that. I think the relationships you have with your board and with investors are super critical, and they're the ones that are there for you in the emotionally difficult times. So I appreciate y'all's insight. Would love to pivot a little bit. This is, I guess, the B2B panel, so would like to talk about your customers. And how did y'all determine what does your perfect or your target customer look like? What was that evolution and journey? And then how do y'all go about acquiring them today?
Here's where I really struggled early on, and this is literally kind of the dynamic that went through my mind with being in the apparel industry. So I'll ask a question. How many of you live in a nudist colony? How many want to live in a nudist colony? I literally thought, we're in the apparel business. We can appeal to everybody. I mean, literally everybody makes a choice, unless you live in a nudist colony, every morning on what shirt you're going to wear. Guess how well that worked? Not at all. And there's two sides of our business. There's a consumer side, so a lot of the stuff that we had here that's either authentically American branded or collegiate licenses. But we also have the corporate B2B side, which is now 90% of our business, because every business, every charity, every organization, buys polos, buys T-shirts for the brand. And I'm not just borderline ADD. I really struggle with focus, and I think that's common with entrepreneurs. But what COVID, as much bad as COVID was, what COVID really forced us to do was focus. And we took a hard look and said, where does our brand really resonate with? Where does it really respond? Where does it really align? And what we really determined is that veteran-owned and veteran-operated businesses and veteran-focused charities is a real sweet spot for us, because cut from the same cloth, have the same values, they respect and appreciate that we're American-made, and when they find out that we're competitively priced, a 6-month or a year-long sales cycle is about 6 minutes. I mean, they switch to us, and that has spun a whole new dynamic around for us, just having a very narrow focus. And from a smaller spectrum, I mean, this is a shocking statistic. There's 400,000 veteran-owned businesses with 10 or more employees. So, I mean, that's a huge market for us. We're also now working with over 100 Fortune 500 companies. And again, this ties to veteran. And 5 years ago, I had no plans for going ahead and pursuing Fortune 500 companies because my experience with them, the procurement process, is forever long. And we didn't have that long, but 2 years ago, Procter & Gamble reached out, and they said, Dean, we have all these veterans in this ERG. We don't want Nike, we don't want Polo, we don't want Made in China. We want to work with you, can you help us? And I said, we absolutely can, but what's an ERG? I'd never heard that name and never knew it, but as they explained it, they said, well, there's an African-American ERG, there's an Hispanic ERG, there's a veteran ERG. All Fortune 500 companies have them. So it's like this small little affinity group within these big companies. And as I started doing my research, it was true. Every single Fortune 500 company had them. And these small little affinity groups are thousands of employees, thousands of employees. And when I call up a Fortune 500 company now, and instead of a blank stare on who do I work with, when I say, well, who's the leader of your Fortune 500 veteran ERG, I mean, they know specifically who it is. So, I mean, that laser focus now, very narrow, is really paid huge, huge dividends. And a lot of people, when they visited our table out there, love that sweat-activated print innovation. And if you're a small business, you're a small charity, you love that you can only order 24. So we keep our minimums low. We're a small business. We love to work with small businesses, but we also love big orders. And just last week, a top 10 accounting firm ordered 27,000. 27,000. So that's been the real lesson for me, is just the power and focus and really, knowing who your customer is, knowing who that target is.
Yeah, I think to me, a huge turnoff when talking to entrepreneurs is, it's like, we can sell this to anyone, and you can't boil the ocean. You gotta, figure out who is that person that needs this most in the world, or is gonna resonate with your product the most in the world, and start there. And the great thing about being a startup is you just gotta sell to one customer and then another customer. You don't have to, do everything at once. And for us, we starting in Colorado Springs, we'd look for restaurants and breweries that were veteran owned, because they, I'm a veteran, they're a veteran. It's your foot in the door. The goal of business is not to play fair; it's to play to win. So whatever whatever's going to give you that edge with that customer meeting, take it. And I think also, for a lot of veterans, sales can be a dirty word, or often your only experience with a salesperson is at a used car lot or something like that. And so you've never really interacted with a great B2B sales professional that is typically much more focused on really trying to actually deeply understand your problems, trying to develop creative solutions, and taking more of a consultative approach. And I just kind of looked at it, as trying to find similar experiences in the military, doing KLEs, where you got to sit down with some, Afghan police chief or village elder or whatever, and you got to understand their interests and, think about what their goals are, and think about how you can, interact and overlap and help them achieve their goals. And just for me, that was kind of very helpful in terms of trying to find those similar experiences and then apply them to sales, and realize that it's not this really distant, dirty thing. It's actually about helping people, and actually pretty familiar when kind of framed in a slightly different context. So,
yeah. So I'm going to frame my journey into two phases: phase 1 and phase 2. Right. So phase 1 is, how do you determine your market segment first? How do you know which industry to go after or whatever? Phase 2 is, which persona do you go after? Who in the organization do you target to go after? So phase 1, I have a little different perspective than Luke here. So there's I guess there could be two perspectives, right? Two approaches. Number one, you have the Amazon approach. When Amazon started, they focused on books. They were narrowly focused on books. They did everything they can to get as much market share on books. Once they perfected that, they started to expand their offerings to other types of merchandise. And then you have the Alibaba approach, where they're like, I don't know who to go after. Let's just stick everything on the board and see what sticks. Our line of business, we're invoices, right? Every single business has an invoice, has receivables. And so we took the Alibaba approach. We're like, we don't know what industry to go after. We'll just throw everything out there, and whatever sticks, we'll dedicate more resources and money to that. And so we ended up with like 3 or 4 verticals that like got the most traction. And it's different in terms of jurisdictions as well. In the UK, it's different than the US. It's different than Australia. We're in Australia right now. And so we took that approach. And, you know, a traditional VC, I mean, we've had this, our VCs would tell us, no, you need to focus. You need to focus on which industry, which vertical. And at that point in time, we didn't know. So it was our way to kind of beta test, like, what's, you know, which industries is this going to be most applicable to right now, right? It's all about timing and all about going after the right folks at the right time. And so that's phase 1. That's how we determine market segmentation in terms of verticals and who you go after. Phase 2, and you're going to call me a hypocrite here, right? Because I sat up here and I told you, well, we're really trying to help small, medium businesses, right? So then why aren't you marketing to them? We have. We've tried. We've sent out emails. We have, you know, reach outs to the small, medium business. And you know what their response is? These rates are too good. It must be a scam. Don't ever contact me. Take me off your mailing list. You know, I'm stressed as it is right now. This has got to be a scam. So please, just don't talk to me anymore. So that's what we faced. So we're trying to help them, but they think it's some fraudulent activity, like we're trying to take money in their bank account. So we're like, okay, well, how can we get to that base in a different way? And this is why we went after the financial institutions like a Citibank or a MasterCard or a Barclays, is they have these huge ecosystems, and they offer the level of credibility to us to say, hey, Barclays is doing this program, or Citi's doing this program, or Meta's doing this program. And we did it through a white label, where we're the underlying technology, and you know, the logos, when the user goes onto the site, it has Facebook colors or it has Citi colors, right? And they're offering this program, but we're the underlying technology that automates all of that, right? So we've had to take a different approach because the market is not ready for small, medium businesses to believe that there's a solution out there that is so favorable to them, because they've been getting screwed for decades. They try to go get a loan, their APR can be 20%. They go through a factoring company, it could be 30 to 45%, especially during these times. They're used to getting screwed so much that they don't believe that there's something else out there that can help them. So we've had to take a different approach. We've had to understand what our market segment was, and then we had to say, okay, who are we going after? Which persona? You know, within these institutions, is it the treasury? Is it the CFO? You know, is it the venture arm? You know, who are the decision makers? So we've all had to kind of figure that out as time went by. So that was our approach, right?
Thank you all very much. Appreciate that. Would love to open it up now if anyone has questions. I realize we're in between y'all and maybe a happy hour or dinner or a plane to catch. Anyone have some questions for the group?
One thing we haven't done enough of, you guys are very much still in the hustle. It's awesome seeing everybody. Luke, I remember seeing you hucking and jabbing almost like 4 years ago in Veterans and Residents.
Oh, Iron Mike.
Dean is all over, right? I see you out here working. But we got a lot of people in this audience that are rooting for you and supporting you guys. So what can we as a community do to help get you all to these next level of growth, whatever that is?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I really appreciate that. I mean, for us, the biggest thing right now is hiring. So we're looking for folks that have experience selling to restaurants or small businesses, as well as talented software engineers. And always looking for restaurants and venues that need to digitize their events business.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm very heavily rooted into purpose. How can I make the biggest splash in a positive way? So we talked about financial institutions, we talked about small, medium businesses. What we haven't talked about is government. We've been talking to HMRC, which is the IRS in the UK, for the last 18 months. And they're looking for a technology that they can employ to actually kickstart their economy after the pandemic, as well as after the shaky economy. I would love to leverage the network that this group brings. If anyone knows anyone in the SBA, the Small Business Administration in the US government, please help make the connection, right? Because this is, I mean, we went through COVID, we went through PPP applications. In the UK, we went through C-bills. It's their version of PPP, right? And on both cases, it was rife with fraudulent activity, billions and billions of dollars lost. Our way of doing things, our technology is actually less risky. It's a 30, 60, or 90-day receivable. You put the hands in the cash of who needs it most, given the risk profile, and you can actually kickstart the economy that way. I mentioned before, 60 to 65% of small medium businesses contribute to the GDP in the US and the UK. Right? So if you want to actually improve the economy, let's go after the biggest pie, which has been an ignored segment for too long. Right? So my ask is, if there's anyone who knows anyone that works in the SBA or in any governments, we think we have a technology that can really make a positive impact that's less risky than a PPP loan or a C-bill. So that's my ask.
Mike, I appreciate your question, and normally people are asking, well, how can you help me? But I mean, you turned it around and said, how can you help us? So thank you for that. And for me, it's a simple one. It's client referrals, client introductions. And on one end of the spectrum, our minimums are so low, most sole proprietors don't realize that we have a minimum where you can order as few as 12 embroidered items, and that's a mix of polos and dress shirts and quarter zips. So that's why we have some sole proprietors. So any veteran-owned, any veteran-operated business, any veteran charity is a great fit for us. On the opposite end, I mean, anyone that works with a Fortune 500 company who's a veteran is likely a member of their ERG, so that's a great introduction. But the other part I didn't highlight, and this is probably the favorite part of our business, is we, in addition to being American-made, the other way we make a difference is when we partner with a charity, we provide our goods and services at cost. And there's over 40,000 veteran-focused charities, and I think the latest count, there's over 150 that we've worked with. So we have big ones now like Wounded Warrior, Tunnel to Towers, Team Red, White, and Blue, but there's a lot of them that are much, much smaller that have a much greater need that we can help them build their brand and raise some money in the process. So for me, any of those client introductions are a huge, huge help.
Well, if there's not any more questions, one right here.
Hey, how's it going, gentlemen? Charles Masters, CEO of MK3 Industries. So I'm actually trying to be growing like my B2B sales right now. What do you guys consider is the biggest thing that other businesses look for in doing business with companies such as yourselves?
For us, I mean, we just try and keep it real simple, help them save time and make money. So I think, it definitely depends on what you're doing, but especially for like B2B software, it's usually those two things. And I mean, it's almost a joke if you look at B2B software websites, in terms of how they position themselves, it's often around those two. And I think on one hand, you want to keep it simple, you want to focus on those things. But on the flip side, I do think it's also important to like think about the emotional component and like how your product may, help that business look better to their clients, or how it, may help them attract better talent. So it is kind of like a combination of the head and the heart, at least, in terms of how we think about it.
Charles, it's a great question, and the way we tackled this was credibility. Because as a new brand and being so competitive out there, a lot of the questions earlier were, well, like, authentically American who? I mean, never heard of you guys, never have any credibility. And once we started working with Procter & Gamble, we could leverage that and say, well, working with Procter & Gamble, and then we're working with Pepsi and Comcast and ExxonMobil. And when we start having some of those customers, I mean, it was amazing how much faster they started, following up and have interest. So that was the approach that we took, is having that level of credibility. And Steve, you talked about it with that lighthouse customer. I mean, when you have that customer that really is that lighthouse, that is that signature customer that gives you credibility, that helped open a ton of doors for us.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard of a company called Pipe here in the Bay Area. They're our biggest competitor. They're valued at like $2 billion plus. So there's a couple things. This is going to sound really weird, but it's actually worked for us. Don't be afraid to engage with your competition, right? And this goes both on the investor side as well as the customer side. Whenever you pitch to a big customer, they're going to want to know who are your biggest competitors. There's a slide, whether it's a customer or whether it's an investor, you're still going to have the same slide. Who are your biggest competitors and how are you different, right? You're going to have that slide no matter what. So we've engaged with Pipe. We've engaged with C2FO. We've engaged with our competition and said, hey, what are you guys doing? Let's try to collaborate, right? And what ends up happening is they put your name on the actual deck, their customer deck and their investor deck. These are my biggest competitors. Crowds is my competitor. They're doing free marketing for you. I'm serious. And this is how we got Citi. Pipe went to Citibank and said, hey, you know, this is our biggest competitor. Here's a slide, and Crowds was on there. And more likely than not, if it's a big customer or a big investor, they're going to poke holes and they're going to say, okay, well, I want to reach out to their competitors. What are they doing that is different than what Pipe is doing, for example? And that's exactly what happened. Citi came to us and said, hey, we heard about you guys. We want to know a little bit more about your business and how it operates and how it's different than your competitors. So that's what we've done, and it works. It continues to work, right? We're not here doing stealth mode or anything. We're like, no, we're going to just let it all hang out. We're going to tell you everything that we're doing. And you could put us on your deck, and you become a sales channel for us. So that's a way of doing it, right? And that way you're not having to reach out to these customers and saying, hey, I can offer you something to increase your efficiency or make you money or blah, 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 or, you know, I have a tool that can automate things. Well, you know, you could do that. You know, it's obviously that's a part of it, but the other part is how do you take advantage of your competitors? And so that's just a different way, right, that we've leveraged.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate it. Appreciate y'all's comments and being part of the panel.